Imagine this, you're going about your day, picking up groceries, maybe picking up the grandkids from school, completely unaware that dozens of active serial killers could be operating right under our noses, right here in the U.S. It's a chilling thought, and it's the reality we're diving into today as we examine a string of unsolved murders in Oregon.
What's particularly intriguing about this case is the initial response from law enforcement. Despite multiple women being found dead under suspicious circumstances within a short period of time, the police dismissed the idea of a serial killer being at work.
Yeah, and that's where the families of these victims come in. They refuse to accept the idea that their loved ones' deaths were isolated incidents, driven by grief, determination, and a lack of trust in the official investigation. They began their own deep dive, unearthing connections and patterns that the authorities seem to have overlooked.
This phenomenon of families conducting their own investigations is more common than you might think. It speaks to a deep-seated need for answers, for closure, and sometimes for a sense of control in a situation that feels utterly chaotic and unfair.
It makes you wonder, though, why would the police initially dismiss the possibility of a serial killer? What leads them to that conclusion so quickly?
There are a number of factors that can contribute to that. Sometimes it's a matter of resources. Serial killer investigations are notoriously complex and require a significant investment of time and manpower. In other cases, it might be a reluctance to admit that a predator is operating within their jurisdiction, potentially causing public panic. And sometimes it's simply a matter of misinterpreting or overlooking crucial evidence.
In this particular case, the family's persistence led them to a person of interest, Jesse Calhoun. He's currently in prison on an unrelated charge. But what makes his story even more unsettling is that he was released early from a previous sentence.
That's right. Calhoun was part of a program where inmates were temporarily released to assist with firefighting efforts. Then, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, his sentence was further commuted due to concerns about the virus spreading within prisons.
Hold on, commuted. So his sentence was actually shortened, not just paused.
Exactly. A commuted sentence means the punishment is reduced, often for reasons like good behavior, overcrowding, or, as in this case, extenuating circumstances like a public health crisis. It's a decision that's made at the executive level, meaning governors or even the president can grant commutations.
That's quite a bit of power, and it's definitely a point of contention in this case. The families are understandably questioning whether their loved ones would still be alive if Calhoun had remained incarcerated.
It's a question that's difficult to answer definitively, and it raises a lot of complex issues about the criminal justice system, the balance between public safety and individual rights, and the unintended consequences of decisions made in extraordinary circumstances.
It's certainly a lot to unpack. And while the investigation continues, the families are left grappling with not only the loss of their loved ones, but also the frustration of unanswered questions and the lingering fear that the person responsible may still be out there.
Their determination is remarkable. They've conducted countless interviews, pored over police reports, and even sought out experts in criminal profiling, all in an attempt to piece together the puzzle and bring justice to their loved ones' memories.
Their resilience is truly inspiring. Speaking of families grappling with difficult situations, let's move to a case that highlights the darker side of a seemingly happy couple. You might remember the dress that broke the internet a few years back. That viral photo that sparked endless debates about whether it was blue and black or white and gold. Well, the man behind that dress, Keir Johnston, recently pled guilty to a very serious crime.
This case is a stark reminder that appearances can be incredibly deceiving. Johnston, who was once associated with this lighthearted, internet-breaking phenomenon, has admitted to attempting to murder his wife, Grace. It's a jarring contrast, isn't it? One day you're celebrating a viral moment of global fascination, and the next, you're facing charges for attempting to take the life of the person you supposedly love. It makes you wonder what goes on behind closed doors, behind the facade of a picture-perfect life.
Yeah, it's a disturbing reminder that domestic violence can affect anyone, regardless of their social status, profession, or outward appearance. And the details of the attack are particularly chilling. According to court documents, Johnston told Grace he wanted to leave the relationship, then proceeded to physically assault her, pinning her down and strangling her with both hands.
What's particularly troubling in this case is the level of premeditation and the escalation of violence. Johnston didn't simply lash out in a moment of anger. He made a conscious decision to harm Grace, even after a witness intervened, returning to threaten that he would finish her off.
It's a chilling example of the cycle of violence that can occur in abusive relationships. It often starts with verbal abuse, emotional manipulation, and then escalates to physical violence, which can become more frequent and severe over time.
That's right. And it's important to remember that abusers often use a variety of tactics to maintain control over their victims. They might isolate them from friends and family, undermine their self-esteem, or threaten them with harm if they try to leave.
In this case, thankfully, Grace survived the attack. But the physical and emotional scars of such an experience can run deep, and the road to recovery can be long and challenging.
Absolutely. And it's crucial that victims of domestic violence receive the support and resources they need to heal and rebuild their lives. There are organizations across the country that provide counseling, legal assistance, and safe housing for those fleeing abusive situations.
And it's important to remember that leaving an abusive relationship can be the most dangerous time for a victim. Abusers often become more volatile and unpredictable when they sense a loss of control. That's why having a safety plan in place is essential.
That's a good point. A safety plan might include things like having a bag packed with essential items hidden in a safe place, establishing a code word with trusted friends or family members,
Yeah.
or identifying safe places to go in case of an emergency.
These are conversations that we need to have more openly and honestly, both within our families and within our communities. Domestic violence thrives in silence and secrecy. By shining a light on this issue, we can help break the cycle of abuse and empower victims to seek help.
Well said. Moving from one difficult story to another, we need to address a case that's incredibly disturbing. It involves a Pennsylvania couple, John DeHart and Sarah Miller, who are facing charges for horrific acts of abuse against their own child. Listener discretion is advised, as the details are graphic and deeply unsettling.
The charges against this couple include sexual assault, torture, and incest. It's a case that truly tests the limits of human comprehension, revealing the darkest depths of cruelty and depravity that some individuals are capable of inflicting, particularly on those who are most vulnerable.
What's particularly disturbing about this case is the level of manipulation and coercion that was used to control the victim. DeHart allegedly used threats, intimidation, and even tried to normalize the abuse by telling the child that it was normal and that they shouldn't be scared.
This type of psychological manipulation, often referred to as gaslighting, is a hallmark of abusive relationships. It's a deliberate attempt to distort the victim's perception of reality, making them question their own sanity, and making it even more difficult for them to escape the abuse.
And in this case, the abuse went on for years. The impact of that kind of prolonged trauma on a child's physical, emotional, and psychological development is simply immeasurable.
The source material contains some incredibly disturbing details, including an incident where DeHart allegedly took one of the children to the oven and pretended to put them inside while asking, "Who wants to be my dinner?"
It's a chilling example of how abusers use fear and intimidation to maintain control. And it highlights the insidious nature of child abuse, which often occurs behind closed doors, hidden from the view of those who might be able to intervene.
This case raises so many questions. How could such horrific abuse go undetected for so long? Where were the safety nets that are supposed to protect children from this kind of harm? And what can we do as a society to prevent such tragedies from happening again?
Those are all crucial questions, and while there are no easy answers, it's imperative that we continue to raise awareness about child abuse, educate ourselves about the warning signs, and advocate for stronger policies and resources to support vulnerable children and families.
Absolutely. This case is a stark reminder that the monsters we fear aren't always lurking in the shadows. They can be found in the homes, families, and communities where children are supposed to feel safe and loved. It's a responsibility that falls on all of us to be vigilant, to speak up when we see something that seems wrong, and to create a culture where children feel empowered to report abuse and seek help.
Well said. Now let's shift gears from these deeply unsettling stories to updates on two ongoing trials that have captivated true crime enthusiasts, the Chad Daybell case and the Karen Reed case. Both of these cases involve complex narratives, intricate legal proceedings, and a fair share of twists and turns that have kept us on the edge of our seats.
First, let's delve into the Chad Daybell trial, which seems to get more bizarre with each passing week. Remember, Daybell and his wife, Lori Vallow, are facing charges related to the deaths of Lori's two children, JJ and Tylee, as well as Chad's previous wife, Tammy. This week, the prosecution presented some rather unconventional evidence: the couple's romantic writings.
These writings weren't your typical love letters. They contained a strange mix of religious themes, doomsday prophecies, and intimate details that were described in a rather, shall we say, unusual way. For instance, there was a passage where Chad referred to his own anatomy as the storm.
It's definitely not the kind of language you'd expect to find in a traditional love letter. but it provides a glimpse into the bizarre belief system that seemed to have consumed this couple. Remember, they were deeply involved in doomsday prepper communities and believed they had special powers.
Right. And the prosecution is using these writings to paint a picture of a couple who were not only deeply in love, but also shared a warped worldview that may have played a role in the tragic events that unfolded.
Adding to the intrigue, new evidence was presented this week regarding the movements of Alex Cox, Lori's brother. On the day the children were last seen, cell phone data placed him at Chad's property, further solidifying his connection to the case.
Cox's role in this whole saga remains a bit of a mystery. He died in December 2019 from what was ruled a natural cause. But his involvement in the events leading up to the children's disappearance is a crucial piece of the puzzle that investigators are still trying to put together.
And there's also a newly released jail call recording that's raising eyebrows. In the call, Lori speaks to someone, possibly her sister, and mentions a conversation with Chad about the project timeline.
This cryptic phrase has sparked a lot of speculation. What exactly was this project timeline, and how does it relate to the disappearance of the children or any other events in this case? The prosecution is likely hoping to use this recording to establish a connection between the couple's actions and the children's deaths.
It seems like every time we think we're getting closer to understanding what happened in this case, a new piece of evidence or a strange twist emerges. It's a tangled web of deceit, bizarre beliefs, and ultimately unimaginable loss.
And that's what makes this case so captivating. It challenges our understanding of human behavior, forcing us to confront the dark possibilities that exist within seemingly ordinary people.
Now let's turn our attention to the Karen Reed trial. You might recall that she's accused of murdering her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, but claims she's being framed and that something happened at a party he attended. This trial has become a battle of narratives, with both the prosecution and defense presenting compelling arguments and evidence.
The latest testimony has focused on the events at the party where John was allegedly last seen alive. However, some inconsistencies are starting to emerge, raising questions about the credibility of certain witnesses.
For instance, one witness, Julie Albert, initially claimed she didn't attend the party because she had a headache. However, under cross-examination, she stated that the house looked the same the next morning as it did the night before.
Now, for those who might not be familiar with legal jargon, cross-examination is a crucial part of a trial where the opposing attorney gets to question a witness who has already testified. It's designed to test the accuracy and truthfulness of their statements.
Right. And in this case, the cross-examination revealed a potential contradiction in Julie Albert's testimony. If she wasn't at the party, how could she know what the house looked like the next morning?
It's a seemingly small detail, but it casts doubt on her overall credibility and raises questions about whether she's being entirely truthful about her involvement that night.
Then there's the testimony of the homeowners, Brian and Nicole Albert, who were also at the party. They were questioned extensively about their family dog, Chloe, whom they got rid of shortly after John's death. The prosecution seems to be implying that the dog may have been involved in the incident somehow, or that getting rid of her was an attempt to cover something up.
The defense, however, argues that this is just a coincidence, and that the Alberts decided to rehome the dog for unrelated reasons. They maintain that Chloe was a rescue dog with behavioral issues, and that they had been considering finding her a new home for some time.
But the timing is certainly suspicious. Why get rid of the dog so soon after John's death if she wasn't involved in any way?
It's a question that the jury will have to grapple with, and it's these kinds of ambiguous details, open to interpretation, that often make these cases so difficult to unravel.
Another curious detail that emerged was a series of phone calls between Brian Albert and another party attendee, Brian Higgins. They claim these were accidental butt dials. But the timing and duration of the calls, especially one that lasted for 22 seconds, have raised some eyebrows.
Right. It's hard to believe that a 22-second call could be a complete accident. The prosecution is likely exploring whether these calls suggest some sort of communication or coordination related to the events of that night.
And finally, there's the testimony of another party guest, Julie Nagel. She claims to have seen a black blob on the road that night. But this detail had never been mentioned before, not in police reports or any previous statements.
It's certainly a strange detail to emerge so late in the game. The defense might argue that this corroborates Karen Reed's story that John was injured outside the home. However, the prosecution will likely question why this information is only surfacing now. Was it a genuine detail that she simply forgot? Or is it an attempt to bolster the defense's narrative?
The Karen Reed trial is a classic whodunit that keeps us guessing with each new piece of evidence and testimony. It's a reminder that the truth can be elusive, especially when memories are fuzzy, motives are unclear, and everyone seems to have something to hide.
It also highlights the crucial role that forensic evidence plays in these cases. DNA, fingerprints, blood spatter patterns, these can often be the silent witnesses that help piece together the puzzle and determine what really happened.
Speaking of piecing things together, let's circle back to the Pennsylvania child abuse case. While the legal proceedings continue, it's important to remember that behind the headlines and courtroom drama, there are real lives that have been shattered by these horrific events.
Absolutely. And while the focus is often on punishing the perpetrators, it's equally important to focus on supporting the victims. The trauma of child abuse can have long-lasting effects, and it's crucial that survivors receive the care and resources they need to heal and rebuild their lives.
This case is a reminder that child abuse is a pervasive issue that affects all communities. Regardless of socioeconomic status, race, or religion, it's often a hidden crime, occurring behind closed doors, making it even more important to be vigilant and to speak up if we suspect that a child's being harmed.
That's right. We need to create a culture where children feel safe and supported to disclose abuse, and where adults are equipped with the knowledge and resources to recognize the warning signs and take appropriate action.
It's a heavy topic, but one that we can't shy away from. By shining a light on these issues, we can hopefully spark conversations, raise awareness, and inspire action to protect our most vulnerable citizens. It's heartbreaking to think about the pain and suffering that these victims have endured. And it makes you wonder, what can we do to create a safer world for our children, our families, and our communities?
It's a question that weighs heavily on all of us. And while there are no easy solutions, I think it starts with fostering a culture of awareness, education, and empathy. We need to talk more openly about these issues, break down the stigma surrounding abuse, and empower individuals to recognize the warning signs and seek help.
As we've been discussing these cases, one theme keeps coming up for me: the fragility of trust. We see it in the Oregon case, where the families don't trust the police to properly investigate their loved ones' deaths. We see it in the Dress case, where trust is shattered within a marriage in the most horrific way. And we see it in the Pennsylvania case, where the ultimate betrayal of trust occurs between parent and child.
That's a really insightful observation. Trust is the foundation of any healthy relationship, whether it's between individuals, families, or even a community and its institutions. And when that trust is broken, it can have devastating consequences.
It makes you think twice about who you trust and how easily that trust can be eroded. It's a sobering reminder to be mindful of the relationships we build, the choices we make, and the impact our actions can have on others.
It's also a call to action. We can't simply sit back and hope that these things won't happen in our own families or communities. We need to be proactive in educating ourselves, speaking up against injustice, and supporting organizations that are working to prevent abuse and support victims.
These deep dives can be emotionally draining, I have to admit, but they're also incredibly important. They force us to confront uncomfortable truths, challenge our assumptions, and think critically about the world around us.
Exactly. They remind us that these aren't just stories, they're real lives, real tragedies, and real lessons to be learned. And while the legal system plays its role, it's up to all of us to create a society that values empathy, justice, and the well-being of all its members.
So, as we wrap up this episode, I'm left with a sense of hope, even amidst the darkness, because these conversations, however difficult they may be, are essential. They're the first step towards understanding, healing, and creating a better future for all of us.
Well said. And I hope our listeners will continue to engage in these conversations, to seek out information, and to be a voice for those who are silenced or marginalized. Because together, we can make a difference.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. We encourage you to share your thoughts and insights on our social media channels, and be sure to subscribe to The Deep Dive for more explorations into the stories that matter. Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.